ਅਜੀਤ ਵੈਬ ਟੀਵੀ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਦਰਸ਼ਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਨਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਬੱਦਨੀ ਕਲਾਂ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਪਿਆਰ ਭਰੀ ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ। ਬਰਤਾਨੀਆ ਦੀ ਸੰਸਦ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੱਲ ਭਾਰਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਚੱਲ ਰਹੇ ਕਿਸਾਨ ਅੰਦੋਲਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹਿੱਸਾ ਲੈਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਪ੍ਰਦਰਸ਼ਨਕਾਰੀਆਂ ਦੀ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਆ ਅਤੇ ਭਾਰਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੱਤਰਕਾਰਤਾ ਦੀ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਬੜੀ ਹੀ ਇੱਕ ਅਹਿਮ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਬਹਿਸ ਹੋਈ। ਇਹ ਬਹਿਸ ਉਸ ਪਟੀਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਆਧਾਰਿਤ ਸੀ ਜਿਸ ਪਟੀਸ਼ਨ ਨੂੰ ਕੌਂਸਲਰ ਗੁਰਚਰਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਮਿਡਨਹੈਡ ਵੱਲੋਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਪਾਇਆ ਗਿਆ ਸੀ, ਜਿਸ ਤੇ 1,15,000 ਤੋਂ ਵੱਧ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੇ ਦਸਤਖਤ ਕੀਤੇ ਸਨ। ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇਹ ਪਟੀਸ਼ਨ ਸੰਸਦ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆ ਉਹ ਬਹਿਸ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਉਚੇਚੇ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਪਹੁੰਚੀ। ਇਸ ਬਹਿਸ ਨੂੰ ਮਾਰਟਿਨ ਡੇ ਨੇ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਪੇਸ਼ ਕੀਤਾ। ਇਸ ਪੂਰੇ ਘਟਨਾਕ੍ਰਮ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਵਿਸਤਾਰ ਸੇ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਦਿੱਤੀ ਤੇ पंजाबी मूल के MP बरिंदर शर्मा, MP तनमनजीत सिंह ढेसी, MP सीमा मल्होत्रा समेत ਜਿਹੜੇ बहुत सारे संसद मैंबरां ने इस दे विच हिस्सा लिया। इस पटीशन का जवाब केंद्रीय मंत्री नाइजल एडम्स ਵੱਲੋਂ ਦਿੱਤਾ ਗਿਆ। बहुत गिनती बुलारियां ने यह गल जरूर कही है कि यह खेतीबाड़ी बिलों का जिहड़ा मामला भारत का अंदरूनी मामला है, लेकिन इस बहस के दौरान प्रदर्शनकारियों के उत्ते ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹਿੰਸਕ ਕਾਰਵਾਈ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਲਾਠੀ ਚਾਰਜ ਕਰਨਾ, ਪਾਣੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਵਿਛਾੜਾਂ ਮਾਰਨੀਆਂ ਤੇ ਬੈਰੀਅਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਉਹ ਵੱਡੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਨੇਲਾਂ ਵਾਲੇ ਲਾਉਣੇ ਤੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਚਿੰਤਾ ਪ੍ਰਗਟ ਕੀਤੀ ਗਈ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਪ੍ਰਦਰਸ਼ਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਵਦੀਪ ਕੌਰ ਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗ੍ਰਿਫਤਾਰੀ ਹੋਈ ਸੀ ਉਸ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਚਰਚਾ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਆਓ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਬਰਤਾਨੀਆ ਦੀ ਸੰਸਦ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੋਈ ਬਹਿਸ ਦੀਆਂ ਮੁੱਖ ਝਲਕੀਆਂ।
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today. I know numerous colleagues are keen to speak and that we have not many minutes, Mr. Chairman, so I will endeavor to be brief. My colleague, the Honorable Member of Ealing North, is unable to be here today, but he asked me to make the Minister aware of his concerns too, and the strength of feeling amongst his constituents who have been in touch with him. They are deeply concerned about the Indian authorities' use of force and are adamant the farmers must be able to exercise their right to peacefully protest. I'm pleased today, Mr. Chairman, that this debate has been called on the issue of safety of protesters and the continuance of press freedoms. It can never be wrong to stand up for human rights, for the right to peaceful protest safely. The right to peaceful protest is a cornerstone of democracy and a right thousands of Indian farmers are using today and have used for months now. Both sides need to step back, Mr. Chairman. Both sides need to recognize the need to come to an agreement. So I hope, Mr. Chairman, that the minister here today will commit to helping that cause, to offer British skills in the negotiation and compromise to help both sides bring this issue to a close. I know the farmers of India, Mr. Chairman. I grew up in that same community. They worked hard to feed their families and the nation. I know they would not be out there protesting if they could avoid it. So a solution must be within reach. Until that is possible, I thank every constituent who signed this important petition we debate today. The continuation of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly is important to everybody. With the commitment to a democracy, and all those speaking today, all those who signed the petition, and everybody who has written to me is part of that whole. We are speaking today to represent more than 100,000 people who have signed the petition. They are British citizens, British Indians, the Indian diaspora, but all care so very deeply about an equitable solution. So I implore the minister to use our skills in compromise to help find a solution that works for both sides. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tanmanjeet Singh Desi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Some supporters of the governing party in India have said that this is an internal matter foreigners, keep your nose out of it. Well, I can tell them why everyone's so concerned. It's because human rights are universal, and a world in which they are upheld is in all of our interests. Hundreds of farmers have died already because of the freezing cold and because of ill health while protesting. For those of us whose parents and grandparents have been tilling the land in the Punjab, have a strong connection with the land, and whose family and friends are involved in the protests, imagine our collective pain when we see scenes of tear gas, water cannon and brute force being used against them. When we see them herded into the protest sites like animals with metal barricades, barbed wire and deadly steel spikes installed in the road, as if it was some sort of international border and not the outskirts of the capital city. The irony of it, Mr. Chairman, is that many of them have actually served on the border, or their children or grandchildren are currently serving in the army. Mercilessly, their water supply, sanitation, electricity and internet have been intermittently cut. Trade unionists, human rights activists and journalists, including young women, have been arrested with reports of sexual assault and torture while in custody. The millions of protesters are from across India and different faiths, and yet because a significant number of them are Sikhs, they have been singled out and branded as separatists and terrorists by unscrupulous elements of the mainstream Indian media. This is part of a pattern wherein Muslim Indians are labelled as Pakistanis, Christians as being under foreign influence, and Sikhs as Khalistani separatists. But we see you, and so does the world. Let me let you into a little secret, Mr. Chairman, about the Sikhs. They are taught to feed millions of those in need for free, year in, year out, regardless of background or colour or creed. They are brought up to stand up for the rights of others, so you can bet your bottom dollar that they will go to the nth degree to stand up for their own rights. Those of us, like me, who dare to speak up for the farmers, are faced with a deluge of hundreds of fake profiles or the 2 rupee Twitter troll factory, and accused by some disingenuous elements of being, amongst other things, a racist. I don't need lectures from them about the wonders of India. I've been fortunate enough to have lived and studied in India for over 4 years, learned to converse in Punjabi, Hindi and Urdu, travelled the length and breadth of this beautiful country, and experienced firsthand the warmth and welcome of its lovely people. And while I'm at it, let me also debunk another myth used to silence anyone in Britain, because if they offer anything but praise, they must apparently have a colonial hanger. To those people, I would say, while we spend most of our time discussing national issues, the beauty of being a British parliamentarian is, in the mother of all parliaments, is that almost every day we conduct debates about what is happening around the world. Now, it won't be lost on anybody that the UK Tory government, in its desperation to get a trade deal, is failing spectacularly to stand up for the human rights of those protesters. So I'll call upon the government to request the Indian government to speedily resolve this deadlock and ensure peace and justice for those farmers.
Order.
Thank you, Mr. Stringer. It is indeed a pleasure to serve under your chairship and speak in this debate today. I also want to thank the Petitions Committee and Gurcharan Singh, who organised this petition, which was signed by over 3,400 people in Feltham and Heston. Indeed, it is a great concern to many of my constituents, and even to those of other members, including the Honourable Member for Brentford and Isleworth, who was unable to join today. We have friends and family deeply affected by the situation, who understandably feel anxious that things could escalate further. And indeed, our local Gurdwara in Hounslow has raised this issue with us. My own family 2 generations ago worked in the agriculture in Punjab. We are all friends of India, and this is another reason why this issue cuts very deep. Men and women have been away from their families on a protest that has now gone on for over 100 days, day after day in incredibly tough conditions. Indeed, you will see on the front of Time magazine this week, the week of International Women's Day, 3 generations of women forming part of the protest. According to Oxfam India, 85% of rural women work in agriculture. And Mr. Stringer, we know this is an issue that must be resolved through discussions and democratic means in India alone. But in doing that, along with democracy, is a right to press freedoms and safety of protesters. No one supports violence, and that has been rightly condemned. The laws have been suspended for 18 months by the Supreme Court, and a solution must be found. Whilst protests have been largest in Punjab, Haryana and Western UP, there have been smaller protests across the country, with people of different faiths. This is not a religious dispute. The Indian government have said they will preserve the MSP, but this doesn't yet have a legislative base. The laws have led to a fear over income and livelihoods. Experience in other countries has suggested that, contrary to improving farmers' incomes, corporatisation has depressed them, and it needs to be debated. But whatever your assessment of the laws, the concerns about press freedom and the safety of protesters are what we discuss today. Issues that led to the Leader of the House here saying that as India is our friend, it is only right we make representations when we think things are happening that are not in the interests of a country that is our friend. The world saw the arrest of 25-year-old Nodeep Kaur and then of climate activists Disha Ravi. The Sessions Judge said in granting bail that citizens are conscience keepers of the government. They cannot be jailed simply because they choose to disagree with state policies. Medical support staff have been beaten at rallies. Concerns have been raised about journalists. The Sikh Human Rights Group, an NGO with special consultative status at the UN, has received highly credible evidence in the form of 20-plus first instance report or FIRs from the senior advocate overseeing cases of allegations of and charges that are unsustainable being made by the police. And indeed, those who have made any comment against the abuses have been subject to a tirade of abuse from far-right forces. Indeed, approach against Gurdwaras in three cities a few weeks ago.
Mr. Evans.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Stringer, and a pleasure to serve in your chairmanship under these new arrangements. And so far, so good. The technology appears to have worked very well. I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member for Linlithgow and East Falkirk for introducing this debate here today in an excellent way. I pay tribute to the work the Honourable Member has done on the Petitions Committee. And I'm also very grateful to the contributions from all Honourable and Right Honourable members, many of whom have given very passionate speeches this afternoon, understandably so given the interest within Honourable and Right Honourable members' constituencies and their own personal connections with this part of India. And I'd also like to thank Councillor Gurchan Singh, who the Honourable Member for Oxford West and Abingdon rightly commended for initiating the petition and ultimately this debate. Now, there are clearly very strong feelings about the farmers' protests and press freedoms in India, both inside and outside of the House, as indicated by the fact that over 100,000 people have signed this petition, and can I thank every single one of them as well for taking such a keen interest in bringing this subject to the House. I'll try and respond to as many of the points raised by honourable members as part of my remarks, but I am conscious I need to give the Honourable Member for Linlithgow and East Falkirk a few minutes before the end of this debate. He says, hurriedly looking at a clock to see how long we've got. Mr. Stringer might give me a pointer at some point. So I can start by saying our officials from our network of high commissions in India have monitored and reported back on the protest in response to the agricultural reform laws ever since they first flared up in September. In January, the Indian Supreme Court suspended the reforms and established an expert committee to scrutinise the laws. We understand the committee has completed its consultations with concerned parties and will give a final report to the Supreme Court at the end of the month. We're also aware that the Indian government has met with farmers' unions on several occasions and that those talks remain inconclusive but are ongoing. Understandably, these events have caused alarm and uncertainty for many British people who have family ties to farming communities in India. The government's written response to this petition aimed to address those concerns while also making clear that agricultural policy is a domestic matter for the Indian government, as the Honourable Member for Aberavon, the official opposition spokesman, has also confirmed. However, the UK government believes firmly that freedom of speech, internet freedom, which has been raised by Wolverhampton, the Honourable Member for Wolverhampton South East and many others, alongside the right to peaceful protest are vital to any democracy. And we also accept that if a protest crosses the line into illegality, security forces in a democracy have the right to enforce law and order in a proportionate way. We encourage all states to ensure that domestic laws and the way in which they are enforced must comply with international human rights standards. And in that spirit, we look to the Government of India to uphold the freedoms and rights guaranteed to its people by its constitution and by the international instruments to which India is party. Now, during the debate, concerns have also been raised by Right Honourable and Honourable members, including the members for Islington North, Peterborough, Ealing Southall, and the SNP spokesman for the Honourable Member for Argyll and Bute, about press freedom in India. And again, let me be clear that this government believes that an independent media is essential to any robust democracy. That's why we are committed to championing media freedom around the world, as is evident from our ambitious media freedom campaign that we launched in November 2018. India has a vibrant media scene which promotes lively debate across the political spectrum, and the UK government has worked to support this democratic tradition. For example, in 2019 we awarded scholarships on our flagship Chevening programme to 7 talented and aspiring young Indian journalists. And last year we supported the Thomson Reuters Foundation to run workshops for Indian journalists to help them report on human rights issues. Now, my colleague, Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, is the Minister responsible for both human rights and for our relations with India. He regularly discusses media freedom, including the Media Freedom Coalition, of which the UK is a founding member, with India's Minister of State for External Affairs. And members, Honourable and Right Honourable members, will recognise that this is a time of great ambition for the UK's relationship with India. Both governments are working to advance shared priorities across trade and investment, health, sustainability and climate change, and defence and security. We're also working with India as a force for good on the UN Security Council and as one of the Prime Minister's guest countries at the G7 summit later this year in June. This cooperation will help us fix global problems, and it will strengthen prosperity and well-being in India and the UK. However, whilst this is an exciting time for the UK-India partnership, it does not hinder us from raising difficult issues. And a number of Right Honourable and Honourable members, including the members for Ilford, Hayes and Harlington, Birmingham, Perry Barr, raised the upcoming visit of the Prime Minister to India. This will be an opportunity to and discuss a range of bilateral issues with India where we have serious and specific concerns. We will raise them directly with the Indian government, as you'd expect of a friend and neighbour. Candid discussions are an important part of our mature and wide-ranging relationship with the Indian government. Now, I know the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office officials have met with the Indian High Commissioner and discussed this very thing, the UK parliamentary interest in the freedom of civil society groups, for example, to operate in India. And Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon speaks regularly to his counterparts in the Indian Ministry of External Affairs, as well as to the High Commissioner here in the UK. Human rights issues are an essential part of these conversations. The Honourable Member for Oxford West raised the issue about Article 9. We've not made an assessment of India's agricultural bills in relation to Article 9. I will certainly consult officials on this, but would stress again that these reforms are a domestic matter for India. The Honourable Member for Birmingham Hall Green raised the issue of sanctions. This sanctions regime, which we launched in July, enables the UK to impose sanctions on those who commit serious human rights violations or abuses. It's not appropriate to speculate on who may be designated under the regime in the future, as to do so could very well reduce the impact. And again, the opposition spokesman raised the issue of Amnesty International in India. We raised this case with the High Commissioner on the 1st of December, and officials via Lord Ahmed, and our officials have raised our concerns most recently in November as well as December. So we've requested that Amnesty's accounts be unfrozen while the investigation is ongoing. In our contacts with the Government of India, we've noted the important role of organisations like Amnesty in a democracy.
Can the Minister bring his remarks to a conclusion?
I can.
Very quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Stringer. Let me end by reassuring colleagues that the UK Government will continue to monitor developments relating to these protests incredibly closely, and where we have concerns, we will continue to raise them with the Indian Government while respecting the fact that these agricultural reforms are an internal matter.
Thank you. Back to Scotland. Martin Day to wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Stringer. May I take this opportunity to thank all who took part. It's fantastic that these debates are taking place, so my thanks to the House authorities for facilitating them, although we could clearly have done with a much longer debate. The spirit of today's contributions was very much one of concern born out of friendship. The images and testimonies that we heard today are thoroughly depressing. We rightly regard India as a valuable friend and ally, which makes it imperative that we do not turn a blind eye to the events taking place. To do so would be a failure of both diplomacy and friendship.
Order. Order. In order to allow the safe exit of honourable members participating in this item of business and the safe arrival of those participating in the next, I am suspending the sitting. Please will members participating physically leave the room promptly by the exit door on the left while observing social distancing. Thank you.
ਇਹ ਸੀ ਬਰਤਾਨੀਆ ਦੀ ਸੰਸਦ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਖੇਤੀਬਾੜੀ ਬਿੱਲਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਪ੍ਰਦਰਸ਼ਨ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਕਿਸਾਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਸੁਰੱਖਿਆ ਅਤੇ ਭਾਰਤ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੱਤਰਕਾਰਤਾ ਦੀ ਆਜ਼ਾਦੀ ਨੂੰ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਹੋਈ ਬਹਿਸ ਦੀਆਂ ਮੁੱਖ ਝਲਕੀਆਂ। ਹੁਣ ਦਿਓ ਮਨਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਬੱਧਨੀ ਕਲਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਜਾਜ਼ਤ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੇਖਦੇ ਰਹੋ ਅਜੀਤ ਵੈਬ ਟੀਵੀ। ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ।